again in the book you talk about the development of the futures field, and over the last 50 years you basically say that the field was born. So I'm wondering, with the next 50 years, what do you see happening with the field? And if you think of it in terms of the layers that you outline?
Well, I think it's going to be much easier to draw attention to the way that everybody uses foresight in everyday life. I think that'll just become common knowledge. Right now it's an unconscious process that people engage in, but as soon as you understand it, it's very simple, it makes sense. So I think everyone can understand that very, very easily. My hope is that futures concepts and ideas and simple futures tools do in fact permeate the school curriculum over time. And as that happens, I think it will allow whole successive generations of young people to simply become foresight literate very, very easily. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's actually kids find it very easy. It's the adults, the teachers that say, oh, it's a new subject, it's very difficult, very abstract, where's the textbook? Kids love it. So you don't have to persuade kids to look at this stuff. So if that happens, then the symbolic wherewithal to regard the future seriously becomes commonplace. And as that happens through the schooling system, and I believe it will happen at some point, I can't say when, then the grounding for foresight literacy becomes commonplace. So therefore, the third level, having tools and methods, well, we've already got those. They're proven. So presumably more and more places will use them because they're trying to solve real-world problems. And then more and more people will see the point of having institutions or networks or foresight capability in some embodied form, so that humankind begins to see that it has a responsibility for the future, and therefore it begins to create the social and institutional conditions that support that capacity. Just as we have fire services and insurance services and emergency services, they were all created where they didn't exist once because people saw a need. So eventually, foresight work needs to be financed from the public purse as being for the social good.
And is that possible in the 50 years?
Absolutely. I doubt if it'll take that long. Because we have so many learning experiences in store for us about what happens if we don't. So
the field will become quite mainstream
I
within that 50?
I believe the field will go mainstream long before 50 years.
Okay. A question that one of my fellow students would have been asking: what would a political leader with social foresight look like, act like, speak like? Do you have a vision of that?
Well, I think we have some examples in Africa and also in Czechoslovakia with key leaders who saw beyond the obvious and were able to transcend the small petty politics, and basically these people are world-centric. They pay attention to the local because that's their job, they understand that, but that's nested within a more universal view. So the big shift for political leaders is to get them out of the short-term here and now focus to the longer-term world-centric capacity, which means that they're relating what they do on the ground, their country, their culture, their area, to the whole global system in every aspect. Right now there are not many of them, but
can you name a couple?
Well, who's the guy in South Africa who's made such a big standing, and the poet in Czechoslovakia, whose name I've just forgotten. No, the ex-president of Czechoslovakia is.
We will come back to you on that one.
Václav Havel.
Havel, yes. That's it. I suppose a point to end on is your new book is perhaps more outwardly critical of some of your colleagues and other communities, futures communities, more so than other writings have been. And so it could be interpreted as your final book, but hearing you talk of late, it doesn't sound like it is your final book. So, wanting to know, what are your next moves in creating social foresight?
Well, first of all, the criticisms in the book of some of my colleagues, particularly in the US of A, I make it very clear and not personal.
Yep.
These are about ideas. These are about paradigms. These are about ways of thinking and operating. There's not one personal comment in the book except positive appreciation. It was necessary because I think the American tradition got a certain way and then just fell over. It basically failed. So you need to understand why it failed. And that's what I've tried to do in the early part of the book, to understand the failure and then to say, okay, now how can we move on from here? And I've forgotten the second part of the question.
What's your next step?
Yes, I think my work from here on in is outside of the institutional context. I feel too constrained living in a bureaucracy, so I plan to with my son's help, Rowan help, I intend to set up a web server and do a lot more netcasting and really use the internet to support and resource people, schools, teachers, change agents, all sorts of people around the world, and to do it out of being more grounded, more connected, not racing around trying to satisfy too many masters as I am now.
So very much you in control of how you influence and who you influence.
My promise to Ian Wallace was that I would get AFI up and running. It's up and running. It's obviously doing reasonably well. I think it's pretty much time for someone else to come in and take it over and bring some fresh thinking to it. I should go on and do other things, and I have lots more books to write.
Good. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.